Hi, I'm Melanie Ann Phillips, co-creator of the Dramatica Theory of Story, and welcome to my new series Beyond Dramatica, in which I'll explore other uses to which the Dramatica Theory can be put, aside from the analysis and creation of fictional stories. Well, there's two things that need to be done. First, one, if you've never heard of Dramatica, I need to give you a brief explanation of what it is and a little bit about how it works. And secondly, why would a theory of story be able to be used for anything else, and what would those things be? Okay, first of all, what is Dramatica? Well, back in 1991, my partner Chris Huntley and I tooled together the very first version of Dramatica and worked with it for about 3 years until we released a product called Dramatica Pro. Dramatica Pro is a software tool that has an interactive story engine based on the Dramatica Theory, in which an author is able to answer questions about his or her dramatic intent, and then by cross-referencing that dramatic impact, the story engine is able to actually predict other parts of the structure that need to be there in order for that argument to be fully made, in order for the dramatic structure to be completely sound. Now, the Dramatica Theory itself, on which the story engine is based, has a central concept called the story mind. And essentially it says that every story that's complete and that is solidly structured has a mind of its own. It has a psychology, and it has a personality, as if it were a single human being. The psychology is created by the underlying dramatic structure, and the personality is developed through the storytelling. Those two are actually completely independent, but they're blended together into the complete work, which is why, over centuries, people have been trying to understand how stories work by looking at the finished product and trying to see the patterns. What you have to do is strip away the storytelling or the content or the passion in order to see the elements of structure and the dynamics that drive them. Now, a little more about this story mind concept. Essentially, the Dramatica Theory of Story says every story is a model of a single mind's psychology as it tries to solve a problem, that it's dealing with some sort of inequity and trying to find a way to either balance it or remove it. Well, that's kind of a bold concept, and it didn't happen overnight. When first we were working with Dramatica Theory, we started looking into the psychology of individual characters, and I remember Chris saying, if you have a main character who's the cause of all the problems, like Scrooge in A Christmas Carol, why doesn't he see he's the cause of the problems? In real life, why don't we see that we're the cause of many of our own problems, and then just simply take action to change that? Well, it turned out there was something going on called justification. Now, a lot of people say, I justified that decision by these reasons, and effectively they use it to mean that there were legitimate reasons for doing something. But in Dramatica, we use the term justification to mean the process of coming up with reasons for something that are not the real reasons for it. Some people call it rationalization, but that's only if you're dealing with it from the thought process, rationalizing. But you can also have emotional justifications, that you feel a certain way or pretend those are your feelings for something and they weren't the real feelings involved. In fact, justification happens anytime we make assumptions. For example, where there's smoke, there's fire. That's a spatial assumption. Two things exist in the same place at the same time. Where there's smoke, you will also find fire. Or, one bad apple spoils the bunch. That's a temporal assumption. You put a bad apple in with a bunch of them, and eventually it will spoil the rest. We have to make these kinds of assumptions in order to see things in the world that are causal relationships and build up some sort of pre-built elements that we can rely on, elements of logic. If we had to refigure that every time one thing showed up, something else would also be present, or every time we did this, something else would follow, at the very most basic levels, we can never get beyond basic thinking. It's the fact that when we see a kind of relationship build up over and over and over again, that we then assume that it's always going to be that way, or at least it's almost always going to be that way. And then we stop considering it whether it is that way or not. Instead, we use that as a building block for the next level of assumptions and move our way up. In so doing, we build up what we call justifications. That doesn't mean we've done anything wrong. It means a good survival trait is not to have to refigure the basics every time you make a complex decision. To be able to move up the ladder and take groups of previous decisions and use them as single objects and say, well, if this little substructure that I have is true and this little substructure I have is true, then I can bring both of them together and that would mean this would be true. So it's a way of understanding our world and a way of moving beyond just the simple nuts and bolts of what's going on in their most basic sense. Well, stories do this too. Stories wind themselves up. In fact, the structure of stories is multidimensional, wheels within wheels, large assumptions based on smaller assumptions, and it's multi-level. The way we represented it, there's a structure that looks kind of like a 3D chess set crossed with a Rubik's Cube, with larger elements at the top, and as we narrow it down to the smaller more elemental assumptions down at the bottom, they get to tinier and tinier elements within these families that are then within even larger families, and it creates this big Rubik's Cube 3D chess set model. There's some pictures of it in other videos I have on this YouTube channel. The dynamics of story are the mental processes that move these elements in and out of order. They bring them into conjunction. They bring 2 of them in, 3 of them in, 4 of them in to build the higher assumptions. It's the twisting and turning of these basic assumptions, these previous justifications we've made, that creates dramatic potential. And that dramatic potential is what happens in our mind. Imagine that our minds are filled with processes that are the objects that are being rearranged. That just like an object-oriented programming in computers, you have mental processes that can be treated as if they're single objects. Fear, hope, having a goal. A goal is not a mental process. Having a goal is a process. And no matter what culture we're in, no matter what our personal experiences are, no matter what our history is, we all have goals. So that's a mental process we all share across all humanity and through all time. Well, the Dramatica Theory has taken those mental processes, turned them into objects, and then said, when we're thinking about a goal, and we see how our goal relates to our hopes or dreams, or how our goal relates to what truly motivates us, or our goal relates to our fears, when we're bringing things into conjunction, here are the dynamics that determine how those things can work. Like we all know, there's the stages of grief and Freud's psychosexual stages. Each one of those has to be gone through in a certain order. You can't skip steps. There are rules for how we can move from one mental process to another, and that is what keeps Rubik's Cube always being a cube. Instead of taking one piece out of the middle and sticking it somewhere else, you have to do it by twisting and turning. Similarly, we built a model of how the mind psychology twists and turns when we're trying to solve a problem. Now, that's the first part about what Dramatica is. Certainly we don't use it for story that way. We use it to understand what's going to happen in Act 2 and whether this character will come into conflict and in what way with that other character. But as a result of all of these story structure elements that were created as the byproduct of sophisticated communication, once we had the model, we had a model of psychology. And this model of psychology can now be applied to real-world psychology. This is part 2 of this little opening introduction. We can apply it to the way the human mind works, or how groups of people, when they congregate, the flow of their psychology through that system tends to organize that system as a harmonic or replica of human psychology. So just as a single character would have a psychology and the whole story will have its own psychology, similarly, every individual in the world has his own psychology, and every group of individuals has a psychology, like a club or an organization. And every group of groups, so you can have a society or a movement or a nation or a group of nations, all of them have their own psychology as if they were a single human mind in a fractal sense. When human beings as individuals come together with identical underlying psychological patterns, the groups they're in take on those same patterns in a fractal sense, and you can analyze them at all levels. Since we're also dealing with the way we make patterns in our minds, anything that we see in patterns, a spiral in a galaxy, a spiral in a teacup, what do they have in common? That we see them both as spirals and nothing else. And that's because the patterns of our mind look for the closest way of organizing that information, that data that we're looking at, to the patterns that we're capable of creating. And they see a spiral in each case. It doesn't mean those things are identical. It means that that's the best pattern we're able to create to understand the data that we're observing. Well, that's enough for this opening section, and in future areas we'll be dealing in more specifics with the ways we're going to apply it to all kinds of areas, ranging from quantum mechanics, through unified field theory, through social engineering, and human psychology.